Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Tom, and I'm doing a presentation on Milton Rogovin, a social documentary photographer. This is for our class, Photography 52, Photographers and Their Images. And I actually found Milton through one of the websites that was referred to us by Professor Gentry. I had never heard of him before, and I guess my taste in photography tend to veer towards social documentary photographers, people who capture the streets and neighborhoods and everyday life of your everyday person. So, a little background on Milton. He was born in 1909 in Brooklyn of ethnic Jewish heritage. His parents came from Lithuania. He is kind of unconventional, which I liked too, because he started as an optometrist. He didn't grow up an artist. He didn't have artist parents. He had a very practical job, went to Columbia University, graduated in 1931. While he was an optometrist in New York City, he became very socially active, working for voter registration drives in Black communities and volunteering as a literature director for the local Communist Party. That's right, he was a Red. As he worked within the community, he became distressed by the rampant and worsening poverty resulting from the Great Depression, and he began attending night classes at the New York Workers' School, a radical educational institution sponsored by the Communist Party. He moved to Buffalo in 1938, began his own optometry practice, married his wife, the love of his life, and his photography and life partner. Following this was a stint in the U.S. Army as an optometrist and the birth of his 3 children. So he had a full life as an optometrist, as a very successful optometrist before becoming a photographer. But while he was working, he was always involved in his community, which I find inspiring as well. Spur of luck, found his first camera in 1942. He would go on trips with his wife Anne, one of his trips being to Mexico. You can see here one of the photos from his early Mexico series, taken sometime between 1953 and 1961, because he did go multiple times. They visited Mexico in the early 1950s. One of a couple of places that he photographed in, Chiapas and Oaxaca in the Yucatan. He photographed health clinics, Mayan ruins, outdoor markets. He was a tourist, so he just photographed what he saw, but he still got a very human sense. It looks like an intimate sense of the community, which is very cool. And one of the quotes that I love the most is the one that's above. And it pretty much captures his career, I think. All my life, I've focused on the poor. The rich ones have their own photographers. Really admire that. Okay. Next slide. Here's some more photos of Mexico, taken sometime between 1953 and 1961. So this is the beginning of another series called the Storefront Church series, photos taken between 1958 and 1961. So these photos were actually taken after Rogovin was already called to the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1957 due to his involvement with the New York Workers' School and his volunteer work with the Communist Party. He pled the Fifth, but the reputation of his optometry practice was tainted. He continued as an optometrist, but after the hearing, he was really inspired to work towards a more just and equal and accepting society. So he kept taking photos, and he was very inspired to take photos in different communities in his neighborhood, perhaps communities that were neglected. One of his friends, a music professor at the State University College of Buffalo, asked him to come take photos of the services that he was recording. So through this project, he met another photographer named Minor White, who included him in a 1962 issue of Aperture, along with an essay by historian W.E.B. Du Bois. Here's some photos from that series. You can see the passion, you can see the movement in the photos. And like I said below, the series persuaded him that photography could be an instrument of social change. He actually saw that in action when he saw his article in Aperture, and people started to take a look at these different communities in Buffalo that they perhaps would never have known of. So at this point, he'd already started to phase out of his optometric practice to concentrate on photographing the citizens of Buffalo, but he actually got a calling to go take photos in Appalachia. He had been reading a lot of articles about miners and the difficult and life-threatening work that they do, and he started to drive around Appalachia with his wife Anne on weekends or vacations to cover the miners that were affected by their jobs and the dangers inherent in them. But he really wanted to capture these communities to see what it was really like to live over there, instead of just reading an article about what was going on in Appalachian mines. So you see this quote here. Day after day, we drove around looking for small mines, where I asked the miners if I could photograph them. Mainly, I concentrated on families who lived in mining areas. I photographed them in their homes and on their porches, where they sat to get some relief from the stifling heat. The results of the first summer's work were so encouraging that we returned to that area over a period of 9 summers. This is another thing that I really like about Rogovin's work. He goes back to the places that he's originally taken photos. He goes back to visit families. He visits the same cities that he went to kind of record how things change over time. One thing that's mentioned about his work by a lot of different people is that he tends to capture people in a very intimate way. You can see these children, they probably don't really know him, so some of them look a little bit suspicious, perhaps, but he really got to know his subjects. He ingratiated himself to them with his wife Anne. They were very friendly people. They printed the photos, and when they would do their return trips, they would give the printed photos to the families. You can see here a little bit of an idea of what it was like, life in Appalachia for the children at that time. Here's some more photos of the miners. You notice, and I thought it was interesting, I had never really read about women miners, and I thought it was quite interesting that quite a few of his photo subjects in his Working People series and in the series on Appalachia included female miners. Happens that the US was the only country at that time that allowed women to be miners and women to go underground. This is kind of the beginning of his series of doubles, too, where he often liked to take photos of people at work and their home life as well. So you can see above, there are the pictures of people at work, and below, pictures of them and their family. So obviously this segued into another series where he continued capturing people who were at work, and another photo of them at home, so more doubles. But this actually covered people that worked in the steel industry in Buffalo. So the steel industry was declining at that time and people were being laid off. He wanted to cover people, showing them hard at work, how inherently dangerous their jobs are and how hard they work, but also that they are people and they have families and they have homes to upkeep. So I thought this series was beautiful as well as very meaningful. Okay, so again, you can see a